The sound of my garage door opening yanked me out of a dead sleep. At first, I thought I was dreaming, maybe half awake and hearing things. But then came the unmistakable hum of an engine, followed by the quiet click of a car door shutting. I shot upright in bed, heart pounding. My remote must have malfunctioned, or worse, someone was breaking into my garage. Throwing on a hoodie, I rushed to the window, shoving aside the blinds. And that's when my stomach dropped. Sitting bold as daylight inside my garage was a shiny white BMW, its polished surface gleaming under the overhead light like it had always belonged there. I blinked, hoping I was hallucinating. But no, this was real. And stepping out of the driver's seat, completely unbothered, was Karen Whitmore. Karen, the self-appointed dictator of the HOA, adjusted her sunglasses, smoothed her designer blouse, and strolled away like she had just parked in her own damn driveway. No hesitation. No shame. Just pure, unfiltered entitlement. For a solid 5 seconds, I just stood there, mouth open, trying to process the absolute audacity. Then, the rage hit. I stormed downstairs, flung open my front door, and marched straight toward her, catching her just as she was lazily making her way back to her house, 2 doors down from mine. Karen. What the hell are you doing? She turned slowly, her lips curling into that condescending smirk that made me want to launch my coffee mug straight into traffic. Oh, good morning, Ethan, she cooed, tilting her head in that fake sweet, passive-aggressive way that only Karen could. I see you noticed my car. Isn't it nice? I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I was waiting for the punchline, the part where she would laugh and tell me this was some kind of absurd joke. But no. She just stood there, smug as hell, as if nothing about this situation was remotely unhinged. You figured, I repeated, struggling to process the sheer insanity of what she was saying. Well, technically, she said, glancing down at her nails, this house used to belong to my dear friend Maggie and her husband. And they always let me use the garage. So, in a way, it's practically tradition. She gave a dismissive little shrug. You know, a grandfathered-in kind of thing. I could feel my jaw clenching. Karen. I bought this house. This garage is mine. You have no right to park in it. She sighed, waving a manicured hand. Oh, I checked the HOA bylaws. There's nothing that explicitly says I can't use it, so I don't really see the issue. I almost laughed in disbelief. Of course, she had checked the HOA rules. Of course, she had found some stupid loophole. Move it. Now. I said through clenched teeth. Karen's smile thinned. Oh, Ethan, don't be difficult, she said, feigning exasperation. I already have the garage door opener Maggie gave me, so it's much easier this way. I'd hate for things to get messy between us. And there it was. The thinly veiled threat. The unspoken promise of endless HOA fines, complaints, and bureaucratic nightmares if I dared to challenge her. Karen ran this neighborhood. And now? She had just declared war. I spent the next hour pacing my kitchen, replaying the conversation in my head, my blood pressure spiking every time I thought about Karen's smug little smirk. I wasn't sure what infuriated me more, the sheer entitlement or the fact that she had zero fear of consequences. She had just stolen my garage and acted like it was a minor inconvenience rather than full-blown trespassing. Well, if she thought she could get away with this, she had another thing coming. I pulled up the HOA website, digging through bylaw after bylaw, trying to find anything that would prove Karen had no right to park in my garage. The problem? The rules were vague as hell. They covered everything from trash can placement to the exact shade of beige allowed for exterior paint, but nowhere did it explicitly state that a neighbor couldn't claim someone else's garage. Probably because no one in their right mind would think such a rule was necessary. I needed backup. I called the local police department, expecting them to laugh at the absurdity of the situation and immediately escort Karen's car out of my garage. Instead, after explaining everything in detail, the officer on the phone sounded bored. "Well, sir, since there's no actual breaking and entering, and she wasn't physically barred from accessing the garage, this would fall under a civil dispute." "A civil dispute?" I repeated, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. "She literally parked in my garage without permission. How is that not trespassing?" "She claims she had permission under the previous owner, correct?" the officer said. "Technically, that could be seen as an ongoing agreement." "The previous owner? Not me. I never agreed to anything." "I understand, sir, but since this is an HOA-regulated community, we suggest you file a complaint with the board or consult a lawyer." My vision blurred with rage. Not only was Karen screwing me over, but now I was supposed to waste money on a lawyer just to get my own garage back? Fine. If the police wouldn't help, I'd go straight to the HOA board. The next morning, I marched into the HOA office, slamming down a formal complaint with all the righteous fury of a man wronged. The receptionist, a woman who looked like she had spent a lifetime tolerating entitled neighbors, barely glanced up. "Let me guess," she sighed. "This is about Karen Whitmore?" My mouth tightened. "Yeah. How'd you know?" She smirked, looking almost sympathetic. "You're not the first person she's pulled this with. But she's president of the HOA. That means, well, let's just say your complaint might end up in the shredder." I stared at her, disbelief flooding my system. "You're telling me she can just do whatever the hell she wants?" "Not legally," she said, lowering her voice, "but she controls the vote. If you file a complaint, she gets the final say. Guess how that turns out?" I scoffed, shoving my hands through my hair. So the cops wouldn't help, the HOA wouldn't help, and Karen held all the power. Then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I stepped outside and found another car parked in my garage. My heart stopped. This wasn't Karen's BMW. This was a completely different car. A dull silver sedan. And standing next to it, chatting happily with Karen in my driveway, was a middle-aged man I'd never seen before. I stormed over. "Who the hell is this?" Karen turned, looking utterly delighted to see me. "Oh, Ethan. Meet Mr. Daniels. He's one of our lovely HOA members, and I let him use your garage space since you weren't making proper use of it." I felt my eye twitch. "You let him?" "My garage is not for rent, Karen." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she sighed. "Since you're new here, I assumed you didn't know about the neighborhood garage sharing initiative. It's a common courtesy for residents with extra space." I turned to Mr. Daniels, who wouldn't even make eye contact. "This is insane," I said, voice dangerously low. "Move your car. Now." Mr. Daniels hesitated. Karen laughed. "Oh, Ethan, you really should read the HOA bylaws." She reached into her bag and pulled out a freshly printed document, slapping it against my chest. I scanned the paper, eyes narrowing. It was some bullshit parking reassignment notice, signed by Karen herself, stating that the HOA had the right to reallocate garage space for community use. You just made this up." I snapped. Karen shrugged. "The board approved it. Besides, the police already told you it's a civil matter, didn't they?" I saw red. Mr. Daniels, sensing the incoming explosion, hurried to his car and sped off, but Karen remained, watching me with that insufferable smirk. I exhaled sharply, trying to keep my rage in check. "Karen, I swear." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "You don't have to like it, Ethan," she whispered. "You just have to accept it." Then, she patted my arm like I was some misbehaving child, turned on her heel, and sauntered back into her house. I stood there, fists clenched, heart pounding. This wasn't over. If the HOA wouldn't help, if the police wouldn't help, then it was time to start playing dirty. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Karen had backed me into a corner, twisting rules, wielding HOA power like a weapon, and now she was renting out my garage to other people? She was getting bolder, testing just how much she could get away with before I broke. And the worst part? She was winning. I needed a way to turn the tables. That night, as I sat on my porch drinking a beer, Ryan Coleman pulled up in his truck, stepping out with that lazy grin of his. "All right, man. Spill it. You sounded like you were about to commit a felony over the phone." I exhaled sharply, running a hand down my face. Karen took my garage. Ryan cracked open a beer. "No shit." "No, I mean, she really took it. First, it was her BMW. Now she's letting some HOA puppet use it. I can't even park in my own damn garage without getting fined." Ryan whistled low, shaking his head. "Damn. That woman's got balls." "I tried everything," I muttered. "The cops, the HOA, legal complaints. Nothing works. She's untouchable." Ryan leaned back in his chair, taking a slow sip. "Then stop playing by the rules." I glanced at him. "Meaning?" His grin widened. "Dude, why not brick up the damn garage while her car's still inside?" I let out a short laugh, then I saw the glint in his eyes. He wasn't joking. "You're serious?" Ryan leaned forward. "Think about it. You're an engineer. You know how to make it look legit. No one's gonna question it if it looks like you're just doing renovations. And once the bricks are up, her car is stuck." I should have said no. I should have been the bigger person. But after weeks of Karen's bullshit, something inside me snapped. I rubbed my chin, already running through the logistics in my head. I'd need bricks, mortar, cement. I could order supplies and have them delivered while she's at her stupid book club. Ryan grinned. "Now you're thinking like a man on a mission." For the next 2 days, we prepared. I placed quiet orders, scheduled deliveries during times Karen wasn't home, and casually mentioned to my neighbor Nancy Dawson that I was renovating my garage entrance. She raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. She hated Karen as much as I did. Then, finally, the night arrived. At exactly 11:30 p.m., Ryan and I got to work. We moved like we were pulling off a heist, sneaking through my own driveway, carrying stacks of bricks and bags of cement. Every time a car passed, we froze, holding our breath. We worked fast, laying the first row of bricks, carefully spreading the cement. The more we built, the more satisfying it felt. Every brick was a silent middle finger to Karen Whitmore. By 1 a.m., the wall was already waist-high. The trick was making it look seamless, like the garage had never existed. If it looked like sloppy revenge, Karen would have grounds to fight it. But this? This was a perfect construction job. Then, disaster. Karen's motion sensor light flicked on. Ryan and I hit the ground instantly, pressing ourselves against the half-finished wall. My heart pounded so loud I swore she could hear it. Her front door creaked open. From my position on the ground, I could see her silhouette standing on the porch, mug of tea in hand, scanning the street. She stood there for agonizing seconds, mumbling something under her breath. I held my breath, praying she would just turn around and go back inside. Finally, after a long sigh, she muttered, "Idiots," took a sip of her tea, and went back in. The second the door shut, Ryan nudged me, grinning. "We almost died. Shut up and keep stacking bricks." By 3 a.m., it was done. The garage entrance was gone. If you didn't know better, you'd swear it had never existed. Ryan stepped back, admiring our work. "Damn. We're good." I stared at the newly bricked-up wall, a slow, satisfied grin spreading across my face. Karen's BMW was trapped inside. And tomorrow morning? She was going to lose her goddamn mind. The scream that tore through the neighborhood the next morning was the kind you hear in horror movies, the kind that signaled absolute, unhinged panic. I took my sweet time getting outside, mug of coffee in hand, just in time to see Karen standing in my driveway, eyes wide, hands trembling as she stared at the solid brick wall where my garage door used to be. Her entire body shook with rage as she took a step forward, then another, reaching out as if touching the bricks would somehow make them disappear. She spun around so fast I thought she might give herself whiplash. "Where is it?" she screeched, her voice nearly cracking. I sipped my coffee, savoring the moment. "Where's what?" Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red. "My car. Where is my garage? What did you do?" I raised an eyebrow, feigning confusion. "Oh, that? Yeah, I decided I didn't need a garage, so I bricked it up. Looks nice, doesn't it?" Karen let out a strangled sound, pointing a trembling finger at me. You can't just do that. What did you do with my car?" I took another slow sip. "Your car? You mean the one that was illegally parked in my garage?" "Oh yeah, it's still in there. Hope you didn't have anywhere important to be today." Her entire body locked up. I could see her brain short-circuiting, trying to process the sheer scale of what had just happened. Then, without another word, she turned and stormed back into her house. I didn't even have time to finish my coffee before the cops arrived. 2 officers stood at my doorstep, grim expressions in place, as Karen loomed behind them, arms crossed, chest heaving like she had just run a marathon fueled by pure rage. "Mr. Carter," one officer began, shifting uncomfortably. "We received a call about a bricked-up garage, with a vehicle still inside?" I nodded. "Yep. That's mine. Did some renovations. Looks great, right?" Karen let out a furious screech. "This is illegal. He's holding my car hostage." The officers exchanged a look, then turned back to me. "Sir, did you knowingly seal a car inside?" I shrugged. "I sealed up my garage. If a car happened to be inside, that's really not my problem, is it?" One officer pinched the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am," he sighed, turning to Karen. "You parked inside his property without permission?" Karen stiffened. "I had an arrangement with the previous owners." The other officer shook his head. "That arrangement ended and Mr. Carter bought the house. You were trespassing." For a beautiful, glorious moment, Karen's face twisted in something dangerously close to defeat. But then, just as quickly, she rallied. "Then I demand he takes it down immediately," she barked, regaining that self-righteous fury. I sighed, shaking my head. "Oh, Karen, I'd love to, but removing a brick wall isn't cheap." Her eyes narrowed. "How much?" I flashed a slow, satisfied grin. 10 grand. Her scream could probably be heard 3 towns over. Karen launched a full-blown tantrum in my driveway as the officers tried, and failed, to calm her down. By the time they got her to storm back inside, she was already plotting something new. And sure enough, I didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, Karen called an emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't invited, but Nancy Dawson, my neighbor, made sure to fill me in. Karen, in a last-ditch effort to ruin me, had proposed a new HOA rule: any homeowner who engaged in aggressive or retaliatory modifications that disrupt neighborhood harmony would be fined and required to sell their home. In other words, she was trying to kick me out. I walked into the HOA meeting unannounced. The room went dead silent as I stepped inside, Karen already mid-rant about unhinged neighbors. I crossed my arms, staring her down. "Trying to write me out of the neighborhood, Karen? That's a bold move, even for you. Karen smirked. It's already up for vote, Ethan. The board agrees, your actions have been destructive to our community. I looked around. Some people shifted uncomfortably, but others were watching. Waiting. I tilted my head. Destructive? Like the time you fined Linda over her flower pots? Or when you tried to ban outdoor grills? Or, oh, let's not forget, when you used HOA funds for your personal vacations? Karen froze. A murmur rippled through the room. That's when Nancy Dawson stood up. I'd like to raise a motion, she said loudly. To remove Karen Whitmore as HOA president. Karen's face drained of color. I smiled. Now that's a vote I'd love to watch. It didn't take long. The entire board turned against her. By the end of the meeting, Karen was no longer president. I thought, for a second, that it was over. But Karen wasn't the type to go down quietly. That night, security footage caught her sneaking into my yard, sledgehammer in hand. And I just sat back and watched. Because Karen had finally made her last mistake. Karen should have cut her losses. Any reasonable person would have accepted defeat, packed up, and moved on. But Karen Whitmore? She wasn't built that way. The night after the HOA vote ousted her from power, my phone buzzed with an alert from my security system. Half asleep, I groggily checked the feed, and nearly choked on laughter. There, bathed in the glow of my porch light, was Karen, dressed head to toe in black like some bargain bin cat burglar, hoisting a sledgehammer over her head. She barely managed to swing it, cracking the mortar between the bricks. The second hit was even weaker. By the third, she was panting, red-faced, and sweating through her ridiculous stealth outfit. Ryan, who had crashed on my couch, peeked over my shoulder. Dude, is she actually trying to demolish your garage? I grinned. Oh, she thinks she is. We watched for 10 agonizingly hilarious minutes as Karen struggled against physics. Each swing got sloppier, weaker. Her entitled rage wasn't enough to beat structural integrity. Eventually, she dropped the hammer with a frustrated shriek and stomped back toward her house. But this time, she wasn't just some power-tripping HOA dictator. This time, she was caught committing a crime. By noon the next day, she was in handcuffs. Attempted breaking and entering, destruction of property, harassment, the charges stacked up. It was poetic, really. Karen had spent years twisting the rules to punish people, and now? She was getting taken down by actual laws she couldn't manipulate. Her downfall was swift and brutal. The fines and legal fees piled up. Within months, she lost her house. And when her foreclosed home went up for auction, I bought it. It was the best money I ever spent. I turned it into a rental for college students, loud, messy, party-throwing students. They painted the walls bright purple, left empty beer cans on the lawn, and parked wherever the hell they wanted. Everything Karen had tried to ban, I encouraged. The last time I saw her, she was being escorted out of the neighborhood in a moving truck, face pale with humiliation. She caught my eye as the truck pulled away, and I gave her a small wave, the kind you give to an old friend you never want to see again. Ryan handed me a beer and clapped me on the back. Dude, that was the single greatest neighborhood war I've ever witnessed. I clinked my bottle against his, watching the sunset over my newly liberated neighborhood. For the first time since moving in, I could finally breathe. And damn, did victory feel good. Have you ever been stuck dealing with an HOA nightmare or a Karen on a power trip? Share your stories below. I need to know, who had it worse?